It's interesting that as the election's gotten closer, we have started seeing mainstream news media outlets actually starting to cover the Hunter Biden thing. NBC
Mm.
covered it 2 days ago for the first
Mm.
time. They came out and said, "Oh yeah, there's this laptop and there's a
Have
hundred
you
different."
heard about it?
Yeah, have you heard about it? Yeah,
This
like
brand new thing. All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of I Didn't Read Your Book. I am your host, Lutch, and today we are going to be talking with Blaine Pardoe about his book, The Democratic Party Playbook. So judging by the cover here, it's very clear what exactly this is about. This is going to be about the Democratic Party Playbook, Election 22 edition. And it's got like plays. I think even if you're not super familiar with sports, then you'll recognize this imagery as like how in every movie ever that's about sports, and they have the clipboard and they the X's and the O's. Except, of course, with the X's and O's, we've got the donkeys for the Democrats and the elephants for the Republicans. So clearly, we are dealing with something that is, on the podcast itself, I try to stay away from, getting in particular debates, specifically political debates. But clearly, with this being the topic of the book, and I mean, you guys have met Blaine before if you'd seen his previous episode about Blue Dawn, and he's also participated in a couple of the IDYRB live streams. So there's going to be a level of familiarity there. But again, I don't want to get too much into arguing if there's things that come up. I'm much more interested in his perspective and what he thinks this book will, what the role of this book is, rather than arguing particular policy positions or anything like that. So, with that in mind, let's dive right in and read the back of the book. The darkest secrets of the Democratic Party are revealed at last. This leaked document from the radical progressives lays out their devious plans for their war against American values. Readers will be made privy to their true objectives, their tactics, and how they intend to rise from the ravages they inflicted with COVID and to control Congress and the nation in the 2022 election cycle. The Democratic Party Playbook Election 2022 edition is a must-read for political junkies, humorists, and every Republican campaign staff. This book is a biting piece of satire based far too closely to reality. It takes the reader inside the heads of the progressive leadership and reveals it for what it is, a scary place. From Trump to Putin, from January 6th to the Green New Deal, from the woke movement to election fraud. Every policy and practice of the Democratic Party is presented in a snarky and delightfully chilling manner. So it seems like the goal of this book is to put his perspective out there in such a way that is maybe a bit disarming. Maybe he is trying to bridge a gap and say, look, this is how, as a lifelong Republican, this is how people like him view what's going on the other side of the aisle. Now, I'm sure I'm not sure in the sense that I'm guessing. I know for a fact that there is a significant amount of overlap in my opinions and Blaine's opinions, specifically when it comes to the Democratic Party and these tactics that he talks about. I talk about them all the time as well. What I don't know is exactly if this is a book for everyone to just see. He says it's satire. So is it something that, everybody is going to enjoy and it's just taking a jab at one side? Or is this a little bit stronger? Is this something that is going to maybe not really be for half of the country? Is this something that he wrote with a very specific audience in mind? So it'll be very interesting to see what is the ultimate goal with this book. There's many ways where people can take what is written about them being the Democratic Party. If you were a Democratic voter, there's very many ways for Blaine to take his position and express that to you without offending you. And I do believe that somebody like Blaine would be able to do that if that's his goal. So if it's not his goal, then I wonder just how savage it's going to be. And again, even though I might be somebody who's interested in reading this type of book, somebody who is not necessarily very happy with the Democratic Party right now, someone who has never been happy with the Republican Party, but specifically the Democratic Party has been what has drawn my ire in the last few years. So it'll be interesting to see what the gamesmanship is something that goes on in every aspect of politics. So I want to know what is the tone that we're taking. Is it gamesmanship or is it game theory? A little bit more serious and saying, hey, these bad things are going to happen. Look what these people are going to do to you. So, without further ado, let's bring in Blaine. All right, and there he is. Welcome to Blaine Pardoe. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's a little hot here in Virginia, but it's hot everywhere from what I heard.
Yeah, it's up in Jersey. It's like 90 something degrees right now.
Yeah,
It's crazy. I'm glad I had some clients earlier in the day, but I am very glad I'm not working outside right now.
yeah, it's brutal out there.
So, we just finished reading the back of your book and judging the book by its cover. As a former IDYRB guest, you know how that goes.
Yep.
And so I really enjoy the cover. I think it is, even if you have never seen a football game or anything, that imagery is definitely very it sends the message of a game plan. And judging by the back of the book, you really do get into tactics and particulars, as opposed to just general ideologies and things like that. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, what I really tried to do, I really talk about stupid idea. I decided I'd write a book on political humor in the most humorless environment that there can be right now, culturally, because something offends everyone. So I decided to tackle this as if it was a leaked document from the Democratic committee of their actual policies, et cetera. And I just really had a lot of fun kind of documenting it, tongue in cheek, very much written as satire. Um, but it's been a lot of fun to do, and I love the cover too. I really spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted for this one, and to your point, I think a playbook, even if you're a soccer person or whatever, you're going to recognize that iconography on the front, and it's going to resonate with you. So, the book's been doing really well. It's on two Amazon bestseller lists even
Oh,
today.
wow.
Your feed-
Congratulations.
Thank you. So it's been rocking it out. I'm having fun with it, and I get the occasional sniper on social media that wants to take umbrage at it, and that's to be expected at this point. So
So I'm definitely curious about how, because this clearly is not going to be a book for everyone. It seems to be the type of book that everybody's going to love, or everybody is either going to love it or hate it. What kind of replies have you gotten so far?
so far, everything's 5-star review. But then again, the people that are buying it, I think, are people when they read the description go, okay, they're if I'm liberal, I'm not going to enjoy this book. I'm not going to
Hmm.
spend money on something that's going to irritate me. And that's how the whole free market system is supposed to work.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's worked that way for hundreds of years. We don't have to ban books. We can just not purchase them, and the people who do want to purchase them can purchase them. It's a real simple system. But the people that are buying it kind of get a chuckle out of it. Like I said, it's very tongue in cheek. It's very snarky. It's very grinding. I have a lot of fun with it, and you got to have a little fun with it, especially with an election coming up.
Oh, yeah.
And I really structured this so that I can do another version of it coming, when the next election comes. I can put out a 2024 version. So,
Oh, interesting.
it'll be
Interesting.
fun because things are evolving constantly.
Definitely. And so that being, what do you think are without getting too into the weeds, what do you think are some of the biggest things specifically going on right now in terms of exactly the playbook of the Democrats?
Well, we saw some of it with the Buffalo shooter that took place. I wrote a piece for American Thinker on this, and immediately after the Buffalo shooting took place a week ago, Rolling Stone came out and said this blame for this lays with all Republicans. Um, there was an you had CNN come out and go, this is Tucker Carlson's fault. You had MSNBC come out and say this is Ron DeSantis's fault and all Republicans, which I'm still trying to figure out how he was involved with what was going on up in Buffalo. But when you see stuff like that, what you're seeing is a tactic that's being employed.
Mm,
And I go through the tactics that the the Democrats utilize, and I researched this. It's not just fluff. It's you watch how they do things, and they literally took a page right out of the book. Same thing with Elon Musk. If you look at what Elon Musk did, which was freaking brilliant, he
absolutely.
came out and said, "I'm going to buy a social media platform." Overnight, he became the scorn of the internet because he said, "Oh my God, we have to have free speech." Um,
How dare
and
he?
and immediately after, last week he said, you're going to see a lot of political attacks on me. Within 24 hours, you saw this hit job piece of, oh my God, his company paid some woman $250,000 to be quiet about a sexual assault. It's literally they're so predictable in some respects, and it's not just the Democrats; it's all politicians are very predictable
Oh, for sure.
in terms of the response. But it was kind of fun documenting, well, here's how they do things. This is the schema that they play, and it's been fun doing. I had a good time doing it. And I guess as a writer, if you have fun writing it, yeah, that's part of the battle.
Definitely, definitely. So using Elon as an example, I mean, it's relatively clear to people like you and I what's going on. But can you talk a little bit more about the, specifically with him, going to buy Twitter, and then, like he said, he had tweeted the political attacks against me are going to ramp up very soon, and then we got this story. What is the like, what does that page in the Democratic Party playbook actually look like? What are they trying to do? How is it implemented, and what are they trying to accomplish with it?
It's under the discredit ploy, and it's one that they employ quite a bit, which is you want to discredit the individual and you make the attack personal, and that's part of what we've seen. And some of this you have to lay at the Republicans' doorstep with Trump. Th- Things have become very personal, and they are made very personal. They also attempt to discredit him. If you think back when Elon said that he was going to buy Twitter, they employed another tactic, which immediately they began to release polls saying Americans want censorship, Americans want Twitter to be monitored, and things like that. That's a standard tactic that they use as well. And when you start picking those polls apart, you can really find numerous flaws. One of the polls cracked me up because they interviewed 100 people and they were going, it's plus or minus 3%, on the poll. And I was like, no, it's not. I actually took a class on polling. I know how to calculate these things.
Right.
This is like plus or minus 48%. you
Yeah.
know,
Well, with a sample size like that, then
yeah, but they run the poll and they don't they don't want you to look under the covers. So,
mhm,
they went out of their way to discredit him. They made it very personal. They've tried to make him irrelevant. And now they're getting more and more vicious. I mean, we had one of their employees get exposed by Project Veritas, picking on him because he has Asperger's, which I didn't even know. I don't follow Elon Musk. I'm not an
mhm.
obsessive fanboy, But it's like, wow, you guys are really scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I
know,
had just released a video on that report yesterday, and this far left progressive tolerance for everybody, and then something that's not even I don't even understand. Like I could say, so let's say he was a big gun guy, right? And they were using that and like, so well, you love guns, so I your opinion doesn't matter to me. Like, okay, that at least it's still stupid, but at least from a progressive mindset, that makes sense. But to say, oh well, you're special needs, so I don't even take you seriously. Like, what? Isn't this the entire thing that you say is wrong with your enemies, which is everybody who doesn't agree with you? And to see that, I was just blown away, and it was just another example of how and I don't consider myself a Republican. I don't even really consider myself a conservative. I think other people consider me a conservative, and I don't care to fight that. I'm more libertarian than anything else, but certainly not a Democrat. And the assumption is that the right is the mean side, and it just goes to show that it's like this is about people. And I think again, framing this in the playbook is all too accurate, because it really is something it's almost like a formula that they follow.
yeah,
I'm
it
sorry. Can
really
you give me?
is.
I'm sorry, Blake. Can you give me 1 second? I'll be right
Oh,
back.
sure, sure.
Apologies.
No,
So
no, but
yeah, it's
I
yeah,
can walk you through it because this is what they're going to unload on him. I'll walk you
yeah. Please
through
do.
what I have from the book. I'm going to have to refer to my notes here as I do it. But first step is you always make it personal, which they've done. Second is you always try to discredit the person. So you make them to be a villain. You slander them in some way. Next is you want to link the messenger to others that are undesirable. So, if you can say, well, he's a Trump supporter or he's a Quanon supporter or whatever, something that will upset somebody or make them bad, or he's talking like, oh, you're a proud boy, then you can get that guilt by association. Next is you label someone. You
Mm.
attach the universal nasty labels, and we've seen this already as we were talking about the start of this, the use of the word racist, the use of the word Nazi, the use of the word any phobe,
White
xenophobe,
supremacy. Yep.
yeah, white supremacist, all that. You use poll data to show that you're right and that person's wrong, and then you misdirect. So you look at like what they go through with some of these reporters where they go, Andy I Nagao, who does
Oh,
the report.
Andy, no. Yep.
Yeah, Andy Know, who does the reporting on Antifa. The guy does an outstanding job. But what they do is they do a lot of misdirection with him. They'll put, he's deceived people on his Patreon page. So how can you trust him? And it's like, what's that got to do with what he just reported? He's showing you a video of someone
Right.
attacking someone. So then the next step is you apply a logical fallacy. We saw this like a good example, I think, of this is when we pulled out of Afghanistan. There were a ton of these thrown out there, and they said, well, if Trump had been president, it would have been worse. I'm like, okay, that is,
How? How is worse? What does worse even look like?
well, not only that, but it's the fallacy of relative privation, which is you're comparing something that doesn't have any relevance whatsoever, and you actually don't know what the outcome of that would be, and saying, well, this would be worse or this would be better if this, so this other thing is wrong. The next step is they usually extrapolate and exaggerate. They blow things out of proportion. We saw this, a classic example of this was in just the last few weeks with the abortion issue. Immediately, the pundits came out and said they're going to come out and do away with same sex marriage. They're going to do away with interracial marriage. And I'm like, I don't think so. But you exaggerate the problem to inflame your people. And then they try to bury you on social media. If that doesn't work, they lie. They just blatantly lie, which, in politics, it's almost, it only warrants like two paragraphs in the book because it's like, look, lying in politics is so old.
Yeah.
Get
And
it.
and that's across the board. That's for everybody. That's what a politician is.
Then they'll leverage step 11, they'll leverage the late night talk show circuit to mock the person. So they'll use Jimmy Kimmel and use Stephen Colbert, etc. And they'll let them tear Elon Musk apart, for example, just so that again it does it. They assume the moral high ground.
Oh
They
yeah.
use data that's contradictory because you and I both know for every fact that's out there, there's a counter fact that can be dug up. And if all that fails, they usually move on to the next shiny object. Although for the next version of this book, I have to add they'll usually go to violence.
Yeah.
Um, and we've seen that, in 2020, which is if all else fails, we'll just resort to absolute pure raw violence to achieve our goal. Um,
How much do you think, because I 100% agree, and as somebody who didn't really pay too much attention to the political sphere before the Trump era, I feel like from the outside that even there's always been extremists and on both sides of the aisle,
yeah,
but it just seems like ever since the Trump era, the left is so ready to take up arms and go through that whole list and write on violence for any little thing. I mean, is this a, a, a new phenomenon? Has it always been like that? Am I just noticing it because I'm just paying attention, or are people really that much quicker to violence?
I don't think we went to violence, so quickly. It really took a lot usually to get a riot going throughout my entire life. And I was raised, I was born in 1962. I remember 1968. There were a lot of protests, etc., and there were a lot of violent protests that took place against the Vietnam War, against the draft, against Nixon, etc. They were violent, but not as violent as they are now. They weren't burning cities and
Mhm.
attacking police, etc. It was minor clashes at most. This has gotten to be the new norm, and this is now the tool that's been employed, and it's the weapon of choice almost. Is we're going to make our point, and we're going to go to extreme violence. And I have a feeling strongly, and I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong, but this Supreme Court ruling, when it does come down on Roe v. Wade, if there's no change to what we've seen so far, I have very little doubt that they will go and riot and be violent. They attacked Catholic Church in Denver. They firebombed in was it Minneapolis or Minnesota, somewhere in Minnesota. They firebombed a pro-life group,
Mm.
their office. They're showing up at the doorsteps of the Supreme Court justices, which, in my opinion, is against the law. You're trying to
Oh, it's not
influence
just your
somebody.
opinion; it is against the law.
Well, but you're trying to influence a judicial decision that hasn't been
Yeah.
issued yet, and it's. I think what's more disturbing is it's become, to your question or root question. This has become more institutionalized.
Mhm.
So what's happened is during 2020 and during what we've seen now with the protests at the Supreme Court justices' houses, the left has not come out and said, stop this. This is wrong. We need, please stop doing this. The White House basically said, oh, we encourage you to have protests at these people's
Yeah, didn't
houses.
Jen Psaki in her last or second to last? We encourage the protests out, specifically saying that you support people's right to protest peacefully. That's one thing, but
Yeah.
by adding the fact that you think it's okay for them to protest at the judges' houses, which he said directly.
Yeah,
That shouldn't be an official position from the White House. Like,
ever,
that's
ever.
so far gone. But yet the Republicans are the ones who are crazy and violent and all this stuff.
Well, I want to be very careful too, because when it comes to violence, bear in mind there have been bombings over, in the 1970s and 80s. There were bombings of abortion clinics. There have been clashes at various abortion clinics between the pro-life people and the right to choose people. There have been violence, but not on the scale that we've seen. We haven't had an abortion bombing, I think, since the 90s, and I know that sounds like it's not that far off, but God, it's like 30 years ago. Uh, so it's
And the irony of it is, it used to be the religious right that was protesting, and especially as a young politically uninitiated atheist, seeing what Christians would do. It's like, oh, why can't you just leave? If now it's those same exact people who have gone full circle and are now or not those same people, but the whole thing has gone full circle, complete 180, and now it's the leftists who are being violent about the same issue on the other side.
absolutely. I think it's interesting to watch unfold. I don't. I think there's a huge mistake anytime half of the country says, "Let's go attack Catholic Church." That is, we haven't had attacks against certain religions in a long time, and that never plays out well if you read a history book. Yeah, when you go after a church, whether regardless how you feel about that church, their beliefs, their doctrine, or whatever, you go
Mhm.
after a church, you're attacking a group that is going to respond
Yeah.
in a manner that you're not prepared for. If you don't believe me, I'd say look up the first, second, and third crusades.
Yeah,
it's
that'll do it.
it's a thing. But it's amazing to me because they were like, and the rhetoric we've been hearing is we're going to be ungovernable. We're not
Mm.
going to concede. The right to life march that took place here in DC last week, their tagline was, "We're going to be ungovernable if this happens." And I'm like, that's pretty much an anarchist standpoint, and that's going to result in a lot of problems. It's really going to result in a lot of problems.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And this is one of those issues where there really is no middle ground. And when you have I am personally when it comes to, like, legally, I am pro-choice, but I don't think that abortion is a good thing. I just don't believe that the government has the right to go in there and it's obviously a nuanced thing and it's a very deep topic, but the in I sometimes consider I sometimes refer to myself as a 2015 liberal. And so at that time, and even earlier in the Clinton era, or the Bill Clinton era, thing was safe, legal, and rare, and that was the pro-choice position, and it's gone so far beyond that. I you know the I'm sure you're familiar with libs of TikTok, reposting what these crazy liberals say. And there was a string of videos where people were not again against this safe, legal, and rare thing. They're saying, oh no, it's just let's kill them and eat them and and like trying to be specifically grotesque to the pro-life position. And it's like, why? I don't understand why people are taking it that far. It's not. It went from pro-choice to pro-abortion, and that doesn't make sense to me. Do you? I mean, if you do, you have any insight on
I'm confused. Yeah, I'm with you. To me, it's a losing subject to get into, and my own beliefs I'm muddied with my beliefs in this. I'm very close to where you are. I think it needs to be rare, etc. But I do know of 2 women who use it as birth control. I know of 1 woman who's had 6,
Wow.
and and I sat there going, you know, in this age of there's so much contraception available. There's so many ways that you could prevent this. The concept you clearly are using this as a form of birth control, and
Mhm.
that's to me that's where it crossed the line. In many respects, is that aspect of it. The whole rape and incest, when we get down to the actual numbers of people that are raped and get pregnant or are involved in incest and get pregnant, we are talking very tiny numbers.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I think where I struggle is when I was a kid, it seemed to make more sense to have abortions, etc. Now with the medical technology, you start going, well, wait, I understand it's your body, your choice, but you have to understand that is no longer just your DNA.
Mhm.
It has its own unique DNA. And now with the medical technology, we know that a fetus can feel pain and we know that it has a heartbeat earlier. So the concept of I can abort up to the time I give birth,
It's
I
yeah,
it's
that
like you
it's
need to
crazy.
recognize that there's a separate life involved with this. And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think I'm like most Americans. I really
I
don't
agree.
know.
Right.
I just know that the concept of I can abort at any time I want and have as many abortions as I want, and that's my right, and it doesn't matter how late in the term it is or whatever. I
Mhm.
don't need an excuse. I can just do it. I don't think that's the right answer either. It feels like it's at a far end of the spectrum. I'm more in the middle going, I can
Mhm.
see some circumstances where it would be
Absolutely.
legitimate, and
Yeah.
when my daughter, when she got pregnant, she was on some anti-cancer medicines treatment for her Crohn's disease. They said it was impossible for her to even get pregnant. So they had no idea if what the effect of those chemicals were going to be on the
Mhm.
child,
Right.
and we had to have some serious discussions about this as a family. And yeah, she went full term. Grandson is a great kid. He's a freaking genius,
Yeah,
and
well,
everything
congratulations.
came out great. But as a family, we had to sit down and have a serious discussion about what does this mean, and what is the right choice and the right decision here. And that was because we were looking at potential. You don't know what the impact of this might be on the child, and
Right.
that's a different set of circumstances too. I didn't feel like telling him to put on a condom, so I'm pregnant again. Yeah,
Right.
and there's plenty of medications now, like the day after pill and stuff that
Right.
are available. I get it. Some of those are expensive. Maybe we need to address that. Okay, maybe we need to take a look at making that stuff more readily available. But you know, to me, you start getting a heartbeat, and once you start dealing with its own unique, distinct DNA, it's not really your choice anymore.
Yeah, that's what changed for me. I was completely I mean, again, not completely pro-choice, but again, in that gray area, but more on that liberal side of safe, legal, and rare. I don't think it's a good thing. I'm not saying that everybody should go out and have one, but if you're in a situation where it makes sense for your life, then that who am I and who is the government to say otherwise? And this is at a time when I was willing to accept that okay, life begins at the time when the baby is viable, or there's a heartbeat, or they can feel pain and whatever. And I was actually watching, I think it was a one of Steven Crowder's Change My Mind that he did a while ago, and he had the chart of where does life begin, and everybody who was pro-choice, he showed the thing. It's like, okay, so if life doesn't begin at conception, where on this chart is it okay to kill because it's not a person? And everybody was people, either the pro-choice people either didn't have an answer or they were giving very different answers, and that just made me realize that regardless of how I feel, the notion of putting drawing a line on this day it's not a human, it's not a person, and that day, the next day it is just logically inconsistent. And so
Yeah.
I was forced to reconcile with, okay, I guess life does begin at conception. Now, again, that doesn't give the government any more rights than I believe that it should have. But as far as my own personal opinion, it definitely does change things. And then, you were talking about the different technologies and how that's advancing. And one of the especially since the Roe v. Wade leak, they've been talking a lot about it on Timcast. And the notion of ending a pregnancy, because the life and safety of the mother is another talking point of
Legitimate.
abortion. And absolutely, but the idea came up that the saving the mother's life and ending the fetus, child, whatever you want to call it, those can be those can be different things. And so the idea being that, okay, if we have to end the pregnancy to save the mother's life, that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to end the fetus or child's life. And so there's a gray area there where if we're talking about these issues, then either we're in a place where it's early on and it's less of an issue, but these types of things typically happen later on, where the fetus is going to be able to be viable outside of the womb. And so the question looms, well, okay, if we have to end the pregnancy, then we have to end the pregnancy. But there's ending the life of the child. I don't understand why that is part of it. They're talking about there was a doctor where the I think the law they were citing was that if there's a complication, they'll save the mother, get the baby stable, and then have a conversation. And it's like, what conversation are you having? Whether to kill a live baby outside of the womb or not? And it's just I don't get it. I don't get it.
Well, yeah, and I always, my wife and I agree on one thing. This is a losing topic because with abortion, you can never convince someone to change their view because sometimes it's rooted in their religion,
Hmm.
their experience, their values. There's no, it's very rare that anyone can sit down and say, let's have a 2 hour discussion with this. And they walk away going, oh my God, you changed my mind with it. We can have that discussion on a lot of different subjects and change each other's minds and
Hmm.
alter each other's perceptions, etc. Or at least getting some, creative discussion and dialogue going. With abortion, you can't. It's deeply rooted, and people are passionate, so deeply entrenched in their positions on it that it's really going to play out, I think, poorly this year. And I'm also of the opinion too, as a man, it's real hard for me to look at this and go, okay, well, I think this is how you should be doing this. I feel awkward doing that on a subject about female bodies because I don't have one. And I'm not saying that laws that deal with men should only be voted on by men and laws with women deal with women, but I'm not sure a man's position on this is as valid as a woman's in many
Well, it's
respects.
interesting that you say that because first of all, we all know it takes two people to create a baby,
Yeah.
and when the entire pro life position hinges on the fact that it's not the woman's body that we're talking about. It's a third or not a second, the man, the woman, and there's a third entity, the child. So that's even as a pro life or excuse me, even as a pro choice person, I resent the notion that people would make you feel that because you don't have a uterus that you can't have an opinion on it. In the same way that they would say, "Oh, you don't get to have an opinion on murder because reasons." It's
Well, I
if
I
that's
have
what
a
you
I
think it
have a
is.
and you've heard my opinions.
Mhm.
I have opinions on it, but I don't I feel like there's an area of this that I don't fully understand and appreciate. because I'm a man. And I
Mhm.
also know that many of these decisions don't, require the male partner to sign off on them. And so when I hear it's my body, my choice, to your point, you're like there's really three entities
Right.
involved here. A lot of times those decisions are happening without the male's input whatsoever.
Exactly. And that
And
brings
that's a to me is a whole different thing too. And
Well, yeah,
and that
because the question has been brought up that okay, if the if there's three entities, and we're to say that for any reason the woman can choose to abort the pregnancy, then it under the 14th Amendment, how can you say that the woman can choose that, but in the reverse, the man can't say, "Oh well, I'm not in a financial position to have a baby, and you can do whatever you like, but I'm going to give up my rights as a father." That and I'm not
yeah.
saying that that should happen. I'm not
No,
saying that
no.
men should be leaving women to just raise children on their own. That's not what I'm saying. But the idea that it's a very common left wing position that, oh, the woman can choose anything and whatever, but then when it comes to like, well, what about the man? Well, he chose to have sex. He shouldn't have done that. And it's so hypocritical, and they don't see it.
Yeah. It,
And
it's it's disturbing. And we're going to see, I think, a lot of strange things play out this summer. I live outside Washington D.C., and the night that that leak took place, it was a local news story, the protests down at the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
And I told my wife, I said, "Do you notice anything about the signs?" And she's like, "Yeah, they're all printed." And I said, "So, like, Kinko's isn't open at 9 o'clock at night, to print these signs." So
Hmm.
it struck me as a little weird that you would already have these protest signs ready to go and employed.
So what do you think
There's
that
parts of
means?
this that really strike me as it feels like I'm being manipulated, I guess, with this leak. And I'm like a lot of Americans. I'm tired of being manipulated. I
Oh yeah.
really am.
Oh yeah.
I don't know who's pulling what string or to what end,
Well,
but
we
I
know it's not
really
Biden. That we can be sure of.
oh yeah, I guarantee that.
That's
Yeah.
one thing we do know for sure. But
Yeah,
that's a very interesting point about them having the sons. I mean, it makes sense that people who are this is for many women, this is the only issue that they really vote on. And so it would make sense that some people would have materials from a previous protest or whatever. But if
maybe.
you but for the majority, I would imagine that if you're out all day and you have a just some cardboard sign or piece of paper taped to something, that's not going to last more than one event. So what do you think is the implication that people had signs made up already?
I don't know. I think that ultimately it tells me that they were strongly suspicious that this ruling would come down against them and that they've been preparing for some time for it. The leak
Mm,
simply was the impetus for them to break those things out. And I'm not saying all the signs were printed. If you look at the footage down there from the local news channels, yeah, it was probably a 50-50 mix. But I was like, who and I don't go to a lot of protests. I don't know. Do people keep their signs in their garage and stuff?
you got to
To me,
imagine. You got to imagine the Antifa members probably have a whole case, a whole
yeah,
room dedicated to their protest materials.
yeah. So
Um,
it's a strange thing, and like I said, I think we've had since 2019 or so, we've been manipulated pretty heavily, and I feel like we're being manipulated again.
Absolutely. What do you think is if it's been said that the argument for extending personhood, if you look in, and I can't remember who it is, but I'm parroting somebody else, but they're saying if you look in history, any fight to deny humans personhood has always failed. And so that would lead us to believe that the pro life sides is going to win that Roe v. Wade will be overturned and that it will go back to the states. Um, the in looking at the Democratic Party playbook, what do you think happens when it gets kicked back to the states, but then I would imagine that most of the blue states would not only keep things the way they are, but perhaps open it up for even more time and late term abortions and all that. So I'm curious of what assuming Roe v. Wade does get overturned based on the leak, based on the fact that they've said they're not they're pretty steady in their opinion that is going to happen. What do you see happening with that?
Well, it's interesting because I went back and looked at Judge Scalia when he did an interview on R. V. Wade, and talked about it, and before his death, and I was looking at it and watching his interpretation, and it was so simple because he goes, "Look, there was no basis for it in federal law. It's not mentioned in the Constitution. It's not a federal issue, which means by definition, it's the states get to choose. So how will this play out in the states? I think you'll get a couple of states that, ban abortion. That probably will happen. Is that going to be a huge number? No. It's probably going to be a small number. Will people be prosecuted if they do abortions in violation of that law? Yeah, just like if they broke the law on parking, they're going to get prosecuted in some way, shape, or form. That will happen. I think some states may loosen things up, but I think things will stay more the same. I think that they will, if
I agree.
anything, change the law about people coming from other states in to get an abortion. So if you're in a state that bans it, you may travel to the next state
Yeah.
and get it. And I think there'll be changes to the laws that say that's okay. I think there's a few places where that is restrictive, that it's it applies to their states only.
Hmm.
It's not. This isn't going to end abortions.
Yeah.
It just really says, look, the individual states get to pick what they're going to do, and uh, you know, I'm failing to see where they're losing something,
Exactly.
and I'm like, I hear a lot of complaining, but I'm not seeing what you're losing. And they're like, we're losing that constitutional right. Well, you never had it. Okay.
Exactly. And
It-
it reminds me of the saying that to those with privilege, equality or justice seems like oppression. And it's like the left has been so used to in the last I don't know what at least a decade been so used to if not getting their way, only being slowed down by the Republican Party and kind of getting most of what they want. Whereas they it's not like the right wing is pushing for universal gun ownership.
yeah.
It's the left that is bringing up these new ideas and these new changes, and not all for the worse, but point being, when they have something that is going in the other direction, they it their brains explode because they're not used to these evil Republicans getting anything their way. And when you actually do look at the law and it doesn't have a provision in the Constitution, then it shouldn't be up to the Supreme Court. It shouldn't be a federal thing. It should be in the states. And then it again, like you said, they're not actually losing anything. It's just the potential, but still they're all up in arms. And
Well, it's been this way. We've seen a whole trend, and it started, I think, when you get back to Obamacare. I went down with my son and actually watched the arguments in the Senate for Obamacare, and one of the things that really stood out, I remember Al Franken, when he spoke about it, said, "We have a constitutional right for health care in this country." And I was like, "Where the hell is that?" I've read the Constitution. I don't remember the amendment that covered universal health care for everybody. We've seen it recently. I heard a member of the squad going, we have a constitutional right to have, college tuitions paid for. The student loan debt should be paid for. They literally kind of on their
yeah,
own rewrite this and play it as they go. And then when somebody comes by and says, well, okay, that's not the actual way this works, it's almost like a temper tantrum. It reminds me of raising my kids all over again. My kids would throw tantrums. Every kid threw a tantrum, by the way. I'm sure you did too. At some
Oh yeah.
point or another, we threw a tantrum, and it usually doesn't end well for the kid. Um, but they've had
Well,
a
it depends
lot
on
of
who the
that.
parents are. And in
Yes,
this situation, if the parents are pandering, weak people like who is in charge right now, it has been working, and it has been working out well for them. And I think that's a core part of the issue. So, in on that note, with the 2022 midterms coming up, I've heard a lot of predictions of a red tsunami. Do you think that's what we have to look forward to? Do you think that's a little too optimistic?
I think it's optimistic. I'm hopeful, but I want to be clear about one thing. Right now, it's been real easy for the Republicans because what they can do is point to the long list of problems and go, look, the Democrats who screwed up baby formula. The Democrats, under the Democratic leadership, inflation's exploded. Under Democratic leadership, gas prices are through the ceiling. I mean, you could go on and on and on. There's a list of things that, look at what happened in Afghanistan. Took a look at what's going on. We're in a new Cold War with Russia. You can lay a lot of almost all of that 100% on the Democrats. The problem is they're not articulating a positive vision of, okay, when we're in charge, here's what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to be better.
Mm,
And usually that kicks in the election cycle right around May or June for a November election. You start getting here's what my plan is. Here's the way I see and it goes back to the Trump era when Trump understood this. That's what the Make America Great Again slogan was he wanted to create a vision for people to go, oh, well, we're going back to something that we really liked or we felt was positive. The Republicans haven't articulated that position yet. And I think they're going to have to do that because otherwise it's just them going, look, these guys are complete idiots.
right.
And a lot of the incumbents have said they're not even going to run. I
Yeah.
think they don't want to deal with the defeat that they'd be handed. So they're bailing and taking their election money with them.
Yep.
And so it's hard to lay that blame on somebody who's new, who's
Mhm.
also running because he can go, well, I wasn't in Washington when all this stuff happened. I'm running for this Democratic seat for the first time too, just like you are running as a Republican for the first time. So you better have that vision of here's what I'm going to do different. But it's harder for the Democrats because to do this, they almost have to throw Joe Biden under the bus. And they have to go, you're right, things aren't going well. Here's what we need to do differently. That, there's going to be a lot of pressure on them to not come out with statements like that because
Yeah.
it's going to be essentially what you're doing is saying Joe Biden did it wrong or that the current administration is doing it wrong. That's going to be a tough one for them. I don't know
Mhm.
how they pull it off. They've got the same problem that the Republicans have, but it's harder because everybody's experienced inflation. Um,
Mhm.
and you experience it every time you go to the gas pump. And I went to the grocery store the other day. I bought 2 bags of groceries for $75. I used to fill a cart for
Oh
$75. I
yeah.
got 2 bags. Um, it's a tax on everyone. And you could sit and try the blame game all you want. You could say it's Putin's fault. You could say it's Trump's fault. But all I know is you own this. You get a 6 month grace window when you're a president to go, hey, that was the other guy. He screwed this up. After that, it's you.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
The whole COVID regime, even though the 14 days to slow the spread came under Trump, the idea for Operation Warp Speed is Trump, and I do think even as somebody who is unjabbed, I do think that was a good thing. I just didn't think it was a good choice for me, but the everything else And again, I'm not a Trump fan. I don't like him. I've never liked him. I certainly changed my opinion on him once I realized that mainstream media had brainwashed me to think that if he became president, that it would be the end of the world. And voting for Hillary was probably the most shameful thing that I've ever done, and I genuinely mean that. And I spent years as a drug addict, and I am less ashamed of that than voting for Hillary.
Well,
Um,
especially after this week when it comes out that the whole Russian disinformation thing came out on Friday, that she authorized and approved it.
it's
Yeah, it's
crazy.
like, first of all, it's no surprise. Spreading disinformation, that's part and parcel of what they were trying to do with Trump. They were trying to discredit him. And again, it falls to the strategies that get employed during this. But yeah, it's rough. It's hard to look. And when you look, I don't know where they're going to go with the actual election for president. I just don't,
I
because
mean,
if are you going to run the
they
weekend
can't.
from Bernie's
They
Bernie's
can't
guy?
do that, and Kamala is polling even lower than he is. I'm pretty sure, and so just that fact that if they put somebody else up, they're already saying that we like you said before, that we did it wrong, that Biden messed up. And so again, as somebody who's not a Republican, who's not even a fan of the GOP, I think culturally, yes, I'm fine with being called a conservative, because I think that the left has gone so far left that I do agree more with the conservative worldview than what has become the liberal worldview. But when it comes to the actual politicians, I think there are just so many of them are bad in their own ways, and the Democrats have their issues, and I think the Republicans just don't do anything. So for somebody like me, I am not hoping for the red tsunami because I am cheering for the Republican Party, but I see again, and I use Republican and conservative very deliberately. I see a conservative uprising in culturally in a way that seems to be, again, in the context of politics, where none of these people who are in office are going to be my best friend, but the notion of who's going to be the least bad person. I really think that with a younger people getting into office, there's a lot of younger people on the I guess on both sides, but again, the younger people, like the squad on the left, are just the ones who are the worst, whereas you see the younger conservatives tend to have that type of worldview where they did grow up in the liberal world, and they don't have an issue with gay rights or anything like that. They just don't want to go off the cliff like the leftists have in recent years. And so I think that the pendulum swings both ways, but I think it is definitely time for that pendulum to start going back towards the right. I just don't see how we as a society can survive if we keep going the way we're going.
I agree. I think I look forward to a red wave, to one, bring an end to this farce of the January 6th commission, which is really, if you I went through the list Thursday of this week of all the people that they've subpoenaed, and what they're really trying to do when you look at the list of everybody that's been subpoenaed is they're trying to say this is Donald Trump and it was a coup d'etat, and they really want to paint that image, and they want to be able to tie the Republicans to it. And if you were a Republican and you were here and you supported Donald Trump at any point in time, you're part of this insurrection. And which is really nothing more than a large trespassing event at this stage. Um, I think that will come to an end if the Republicans come in. I think the other thing that'll happen, which probably is both good and bad for the country, is you're going to get much more of a poke into this Hunter Biden thing. Um,
Mm.
because with the House under Republican control, they can open committees and launch investigations and proceed down those paths. And I think that it's interesting that as the election's gotten closer, we have started seeing mainstream news media outlets actually starting to cover the Hunter Biden thing. NBC
Mhm.
covered it 2 days ago for the first
Mhm.
time. They came out and said, "Oh yeah, there's this laptop. There's a
Have
hundred
you
and
heard about
yeah, have you heard about
it?
it?" Yeah,
This
like
brand new thing.
yeah, and it, well, the and CBS ran a piece this morning on the Hunter Biden laptop, and which I found extremely hilarious given how Leslie Stahl treated the president on 60 Minutes when he tried to bring it up because she said, no, she cut him right off. That's
Oh,
all disinformation. That's been proven. It's all false. At no point does the media come back and actually go, hey, we screwed this up. But when the media starts covering it, that means that they know something is coming. And
mhm.
so there's going to be some indictments on that, and that also means they're going to take a closer look. See, did Joe Biden have any fingerprints on that? And that could be an ugly situation too. And you got to bear in mind they've established a set of rules when it comes to politics, and one of the new rules is you can just impeach at will. You don't
Right.
even though you're not going to succeed and whatever, you can drag the country through this, and you can drag the president through it, and you can make their life hell, and you can investigate, and you can poke and prod, and you can leak information to the press, and you can do all sorts of stuff. They've established those rules. It wasn't the Republicans. They did. And don't think for a minute that the Republicans aren't going, oh, can't wait for the opportunity to flip the table here.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to take the moral high road here and go, look, this isn't good for the country. Let's back off. Let bygones
Yo,
be bygones. I think
well,
it's
I
going to
think
be fine. We'll impeach Joe Biden then, and
yeah,
we'll.
I 100% agree, and I think that that is a folly of the left. Again, these terms becoming more amorphous as the days go on, but it was always the left who was ready to revolt and do this and do that, where again, conservatives, meaning conservative voters, seem to be more on the side of, look, I don't, just leave me alone, and make, don't, just don't include me in whatever you're doing if I'm not interested in it. And I think seeing the fact that that doesn't work, you have to play the game or you're going to lose, I think is becoming more and more apparent to people in general. And I definitely see a tide turning, for sure.
I think so too. I think a lot of people are sick and tired of how Washington operates, but it's not going to change inherently all on its own.
Mhm,
They don't
mhm,
wake up one day and go, if we just all got along, everything would be great. That's not going to happen. So this is going to be some throttling back and forth before both sides kind of can ratchet this down. And a lot's going to depend on who runs in 2024.
mhm.
Um, you know,
So
I,
if it was, so I heard somebody, I think it was Michael Malice and Hotep Jesus discussing this. Do you think a better, obviously, we're far away from the actual presidential election, but just based on where we are right now, do you think it would be better for just in general for the Republicans? Do you think it would be better for Trump to run and for DeSantis to run, or do you think they would do better as a ticket and have Trump be the president and DeSantis VP?
I think Trump with DeSantis as VP would be very good, and I strongly suspect that's what we're going to see.
Hmm.
And the reason I say that, just so that we all are, you can understand the framing of this. Um, we haven't seen Trump tweet at all. We even on his own social network, he does very little communicating.
Hmm.
The fact that he's not communicating actually seems to make him more popular now than when he was communicating all the time.
Well, yeah, everybody was diving into his tweets and looking to every day they had a new
Right.
thing to talk about, and now it's like, CNN, what do we talk about?
Yeah, and so the quieter he is, the more appealing he is, and we may see a very different Donald Trump emerge if he runs, where he's still bombastic
Hmm,
and still kind of in your face, but kind of more mellowed by the experience he's gone through.
that's a very interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that.
I think Donald Trump is so smart that he's playing it well, and he is going, look, all I gotta do is keep my own mouth shut. And the longer I do that, the more appealing I am. And the fact is too, if you followed some of the other information that's out there now, they're talking that the Republicans may not take part in any of the debates. That
Oh, really?
they have said the current format for presidential debates favors, the left, because
Well, you
they'll
mean
have
Lester
one.
Holt isn't fair?
Well, Chris Wallace is the only conservative asking questions. It's hardly fair. So it's I think part of this is they're laying the foundation to ensure Trump comes in. And he's almost taking a page out of Biden's book, because Biden, if he runs, which I think he's going to have to
Yeah.
your earlier point, it's either that or their whole party has to admit we made a huge mistake. It's that line from Animal House: "You fucked up, Flounder. You trusted us." That's
Yep.
what they're looking at.
Yeah.
So I think they won't do that. I think
And
they'll let.
ironically, I think that would be the better choice. That to just say, okay, that was all that woke stuff was bad. Let's start over. I think that would be a better decision for them, but I don't think they're going to do that.
I agree, but they can't, and they've gone so far down this path, they can't. It's they're like a torpedo that's been fired. You can't do a lot of course correction with it, and so they're on their course right now. I think you're looking at Biden going up against Trump. Biden's not going to be able to go on the campaign trail. He's going to do what he did last time and do it from his basement. Um,
Which will
Trump,
be interesting because he won't. I mean, there's this whole monkey something or another virus that I've been hearing whispers about, but he won't have COVID to hide behind. So again, that'll be interesting to see how he handles that.
well, there's always a variant out there, and yeah, I felt bad about the whole monkeypox things. I had just
Monkey, yeah.
put up my murder hornet lights, and now I have to take them down and put up my monkeypox decorations. It's like, wow, the seasons have been changing so quick.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I they'll always have a good variant out there and a good reason to whip people up and into fear. A lot will depend too on how this abortion issue plays out. If we go through another summer of rioting, I don't think that's going to play well for
No,
the left. I think
certainly
people are
not.
done with a lot of that. So they've got the opportunity to shoot themselves in the foot, and they're playing with a gun. Somebody told me, what was the analogy? They said it's like being tied to a chair and watching a toddler play with a loaded gun. Yeah, it's
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. That's pretty accurate. So, getting back to the book itself,
sure.
so am I correct that you frame this as uh, the book itself is a leaked document from
Yeah,
the Democrats?
yeah. And it's done, as I said, very tongue in cheek. It's, hey, this is an insider thing. There's even a great joke in there. It's like, don't leak this information. We don't deal with people well. Ask Epstein. Yeah. So
Uh,
it's that level of kind of childishness, but it's a really a good exploration of the liberal mindset and kind of carrying things forward. And I had some fun with it. Here's the planks of the party. These are the things we really believe in, and things along those lines. So I just had some fun with it, and that's part of, like I said, as a writer, you want to have fun writing something and being able to poke at that side of the country, especially after some of the stuff they've put us through with this whole woke movement. It really was a lot of fun to do that.
Uh, and I'm curious how because in hindsight the play, like I said was before, the playbook framing is spot on. It's just almost too
Thank you,
perfect.
thank you.
Did how did you come to determine, oh, this is the way to go? Because I mean, again, it's just too perfect. Like there's a formula you can, and I think it was last March that Elon tweeted that, oh, if I'm ever in a scandal, call it Elon Gate, and here we are, just over a year later with Elon Gate. And
Ah, it's yeah, when I was working on Blue Dawn, and I've been working on the sequels to that. The one sequel comes out in June 28th, most
and
on Civil War.
And for those who haven't seen, Blue Dawn is another one of Blaine's books that we did talk about. So do check out that interview. He was one of my very first guests, and it was a great conversation. So
Oh,
be sure to go
it's
check
a
that out.
lot of fun, and I'm on book 5 of the sequels already. But I kept kind of a side book of how do you describe, because you have to have a Bible as a writer to go, what are the things I've explained in the universe about the progressives and this progressive overthrow? And so I started documenting that stuff, and I ended up with like a 10 to 20 page document. And I'm sitting there going, flipping through it. And of course, I wrote it in my own snarky voice, and because it's an internal note, and I'm sitting there reading it, and some of it made me chuckle. And I was like, okay, if it makes me laugh, it's going to make other people laugh. And I had a discussion with my wife about it, and she's like, "You really want to write humor in a society right now that nothing is considered funny?" I mean, Dave Chappelle was attacked on stage, and they're not even really prosecuting the guy for anything more than a misdemeanor.
Well, they got their licks in
Yeah, yeah.
plenty, but I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, wow, she's like, do you really want to write a humor book? And I'm like, I don't want to be one of those people that kind of kowtow to the left and go, well, I'm not gonna do it because it might be controversial
hmm
or it might
hmm
stir the pot or
You
whatever.
cannot comply your way out of tyranny.
No, you can't. And I'm not gonna be that guy. I've never been that guy. And I think a lot of my grandfathers who have long passed, but they certainly weren't that guy. They lived life, and if people got pissed off by what they did, well, then the people got pissed off. That happened.
And
Um,
that's an opinion that I think among, again, whether you want to call it the right, just not the left. That's an opinion that is too rare. And that's kind of what I was alluding to before. That it's a hallmark of the right to be more to try to be more cordial and let the left be the left, and we're different than that. But I do see a lot of that changing. This book obviously being an example, saying that, okay, we can. This isn't the Republican Party of the 1990s. This is something different. We're dealing with a different political landscape, and we've got to adapt accordingly.
yeah, I mean, and the whole thing was designed. When I started looking at it, I was like, I can actually expand on this and make it something that is tangible. And I think to me, I think anybody who's running a political campaign ought to pick up the book, not
Hmm.
because it's funny, but because there's elements of true. I tied this into real events. There's real life examples throughout the book. It does give you kind of a template for if you're running a campaign. Okay, well, this is kind of the mindset you might be facing here.
So can you
And
share one of these is one of these examples?
well, off the top of my head, that's trickier. Um, Let me see if I can spot one real quick. Well, this is a good one. The media is this is a quote about how they leverage the mainstream media outlets. The mainstream media is mostly useful for us in controlling the language and lexicon of the American culture. We use labels to opposition, and the media has proven to be highly effective at positioning our new terms and phrases. For example, where conservatives used to use the word Hispanic, we redefined that group in a broader context called Latinx in 2004. Because the mainstream media used that phrase and explained it, it's now considered part of the lexicon. So, I use a lot of examples like that throughout the book where it's like, look, I'm not just bullshitting here. I'm not just crafting stuff from hay. I'm This is actually tied to real stuff. And that's where I think it resonates with some people. I had one person reach out to me, an old high school friend. He goes, "So now you're going to write the Republican version of the book?" And I said, "No, I'm not doing that." And he's like, "Well, you got to do it to be fair." And I'm like, "I don't have to be fair. I don't have to do it. Where are you getting this equity bullshit from?
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
not happening." I'm not
yeah.
that guy. I'm not going to write up a Republican version of this book. Somebody else can,
I
and
was
I
just gonna
encourage them
say,
to.
yeah,
Go out, do it. I may buy it and just have a good chuckle. Maybe we could both be on your podcast. I think that would be great. But I'm not going to write it. I'm
absolutely,
doing
yeah.
this
If
to,
any of you wants to write the Republican Party playbook, you have an open invitation to the I Didn't Read Your Book podcast
yeah, this is a free country. If you're going, "Hey, I don't like your book,"
for now.
don't tell me to go write a different one so that you'll feel better about it. But, these are literally the kinds of conversations that we're having now that 5 years ago, I didn't think we would be having these conversations. It, I will say this: 2 years ago, I wouldn't have expected Bill Maher to be going, we've gone too far." You know,
Yeah, that was definitely I'm a little bit conflicted because I never I used to be a big Bill Maher fan when I was first getting into paying attention to politics right around 2015 and Bill Maher was like the guy for me.
yeah.
And then it was so obvious that he had just a textbook case of TDS, and it's like the fact that of course now that Trump is gone, now you can see that the left is crazy, as if it changed just now. But this is what it's been, and you've just been blinded. And on one hand, I'm like, welcome to the party. I'm glad that you realize what's going on. But where were you? Yeah, 2, 3, 4 years ago. You're a
Well,
big voice in this space, and it was Orange Man bad, Orange Man bad, Orange Man bad. And
well,
again, I am not a Trump fan. I don't like the man. I don't think he's adept at being a leader. I think he has some exquisite skills in negotiating and that type of stuff. But he has he causes a reaction in people, whether it's his fault or not. He causes a reaction in people that disqualifies him, in my opinion, from being an effective leader, regardless of what his policies are. But the fact is, he just wasn't what the media made him seem for 6 straight years.
yeah.
6 straight years.
And you know what? I think I don't disagree with you. I would often put it this way. If I were to pick a president that I would sit down and want to have dinner with, it would probably be Bill Clinton because I think his stories would be pretty good. Um, that would be the president I'd want to hang with. But if I'm dealing with an economic crisis and runaway inflation and I can't get baby formula and gas prices are through the ceiling, I gotta tell you, I'm gonna pick a Donald Trump hands down. I'll deal with all of his quirkiness. I'll deal with
Mm-hmm.
his abrasive attitude. I will deal with him, butting heads with the opposition. I'm comfortable with that because the opposition certainly had no problem butting heads with him.
Right. Yeah.
And that's part of his problem in some respects is he tends to go tit for tat. If he gets hit, Donald Trump hits back 10 times harder.
Oh yeah.
He triples down, and I'm comfortable with that. At this point, I would prefer that to some of the stuff I'm seeing right now when
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like we're awash. And it reminds me very much of the Carter days. I remember when Carter had a summit out at Camp David, and he brought in American citizens from a cross section of the country to this little summit. And he came away and he started talking about the country's in this great malaise. That was the phrase that was used, and it was like, you didn't need a summit for this. The country is feeling lost, and you've got to get us out of it. Don't tell us what the problem is. Fix it. And
Right.
Carter couldn't do that,
Mm.
and we ended up in a situation with the Iranian hostage crisis that it went right up to the swearing in of Ronald Reagan. They were loading those planes up and getting those hostages out of there because Reagan made it very clear. Yeah, I'll turn your whole country into a parking lot.
And is that the because again, obviously that was before the time I was interested in this. I mean, it was before my time in general, but is that's the situation they made that Ben Affleck movie about, right? The Argo, where they had
Oh yeah, yeah. Argo is getting out the hostages that didn't get captured. They snuck over to the Canadian embassy, which
mm,
it was absolutely a stunning operation. It was one of my favorite movies.
yeah, it
Absolute,
was great.
it's on my top 10 list. I watch it at least once a month.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, because it really resonates to me because I remember that era, and they really did a good job of kind of capturing a lot of that. But it was interesting. Carter got caught in this. He couldn't lead, and it wasn't that he was a bad man. He's the best ex-president we've ever had. He
And that's
does
what I've
stuff.
heard from people, who were there on both sides. Everybody
Yeah,
says that he's the best ex president that we have.
but as a president, he dragged our country through, over a year of us looking weak and looking wimpy and indecisive, and we botched a rescue attempt. Everything went wrong. Everything went wrong, and it just pulled the country down. And as someone who lived through that era, I feel that same sense with the current president. And maybe that's not fair. And I'll grant you, I'm not trying to be objective about this. Um, but I feel that we're in this malaise again of I don't know where we're going. I don't understand why we're in the situations we're in. Yeah, how could you have shut down the baby formula plants for safety issues and not realized that this was a major provider and it was going to cause
Exactly.
shortages? And yeah, I heard today, oh, they've landed Air Force planes in Indiana with 316 pallets of baby formula. And I'm like, so how is this getting distributed? And is Indiana just the state that's getting it, or are you going to be landing planes elsewhere? And how much is 316 pallets compared to what? And
Yeah,
it's
not that
European
much.
baby formula. I don't know how good that is. You know, um,
Well, I mean, I would argue that the part of the larger issue that allows the baby formula shortage to occur is the fact that there are such strict regulations on this stuff, and it makes sense why you would want to regulate a baby formula, but when you see, just as one example of red tape causing, bureaucratic red tape causing issues, it just seems like, you know, the uh, I just don't see how the free market wouldn't be a better solution to so have. I think they said it's like three companies that are making all of the major baby formula, and it's like that's not how capitalism is supposed to work. And lo and behold, now it's not working.
yeah. And my whole thing is anybody taking a step back at this point and going, what are the other potential risks that we have? What
Hmm.
other industries are vital for America to function? Okay. So that well-being is maintained, because we're talking the well-being of babies here. Um, so I mean, what are those key industries? I mean, they had a damn list as to who was essential and non-essential. I got to believe somebody's got a list of what we can't allow to fail, and do some freaking analysis and go, oh, wow, they were at risk over here and over here and over here. Let's take some proactive stuff. Everything seems to be very reactive and very slow to react.
And
Um,
I have a strong feeling that I mean, going back to the Project Veritas videos and reports about Twitter, and seeing the size of Twitter's influence in society in general. And then you compare that to the things that these two guys were saying about how, oh, I only work 4 hours a week and people go away for months and nobody cares and we don't really care about it like capitalists, and if Elon comes in, he's going to be all about making money. And one of my things was just that I'm surprised that the company has lasted this long running that way, and it makes me wonder what other aspects of society and therefore government are working the same way, which are just hanging on, and we just don't know about it, hanging on by a thread, and we just don't know about it.
Well, and I'll give you a real good example. I think you raised a very excellent point with that, by the way.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. The U.S. federal government is not fully back at work yet. They
Hmm.
haven't gone back because of COVID. They are still out. They are working from home. Now, some agencies are doing partial openings and things along those lines, but the vast preponderance of federal employees are working at home still because of COVID. We're over COVID. The whole country, the whole world is over COVID. We are done.
Yeah.
But the federal
So
government is literally, it's not being led. It's just the federal unions and the agencies are like, well, it's not safe. And I talked to one guy who goes, I was told I could come into work, but the restrictions we had were I couldn't have someone in my office because there wasn't enough room for social distancing. If I had a meeting with people, I can only have two other people in a conference room with me because of the social distancing things. I can't use the elevator because if there's people in the elevator, you can't get in the elevator because of the restrict. So he's like, why come in? Why bother to come in? I can't meet with the people. They can't meet with me. We can't sit and talk. We can't do our job. I might as well stay at home and do my job.
yeah,
And,
exactly.
and I'm not opposed to that because that cuts down on traffic and emissions and everything else. But
Administrative costs, and yeah.
yeah, but our government isn't, Biden's in charge. He is the chief executive. The executive branch follows him. Why is he letting them still play this COVID game? I don't get it. Other corporations have moved way past that and have gone back. He
Well, do
is
you think
not.
they really? I mean, I would the importance of being physically there definitely matters more in some areas than others. And I think, things like Congress and the Senate meeting in person, I think those things are, you can't get that same just the same experience virtually. But I do think there is a significant amount of work that needs to be done that doesn't necessarily require somebody to be in any particular physical space. And I'm all for cutting out anything that the government is doing that's not necessary. So I don't necessarily have a big problem with virtually the entire government working remotely, unless there's something that I'm missing about what we would gain by them being in a physical space.
Well, let me give you a good example. The IRS backlog right now is absolutely phenomenal. It's a
Hmm.
massive backlog to get people refunds, to process their tax payments. They've been facing a staggering thing since COVID started, and they're still working remote for the most part. I also think that's the reason I bring it up is this kind of ties to your whole thing about people only working 4 hours a day over at Twitter. Yeah, if you're not in the office, you get to goof around a lot. You can ghost real easy at work. Yeah. Every 2 hours I move my mouse so it shows
Yeah.
that I'm active,
Yep.
in Teams, but I'm not really doing anything. Um, I don't know if ever I worked for 20 some years at home for Ernst and Young, the accounting firm. Had no problem with it. I worked long damn hours. But a lot of people aren't equipped to do it. They don't have the discipline to do it. They don't
Hmm.
have the work set up physically to be able to do it and do it effectively. And we saw this with a lot of the distance learning too that took place with our kids. So, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the distance learning with kids. I think that's a completely different thing. I think you're definitely right that people don't know how to have the they just don't have the discipline to do things without somebody watching over them. But I think the whole world saw that, like, wait a minute, this whole idea of going to work, regardless, private sector, government, whatever it is, there's a lot of fat that can be trimmed out. And with all the money that's being spent, all the money that's owed, all the debt, all everything, I think if we can get the same, it's not like the government was super effective to begin with. So if they're at least going to keep it the same or even a little bit less, but save a lot more money, I'm all for it.
I don't disagree with you. I think I always view government programs or government activity from a perspective of there's always these unintended consequences.
Mhm.
They never go, okay, if we do this, what happens? So if you look at what's happening in Washington, D.C., because we've allowed the government agencies to essentially tell their people work from home, what's happened is the metro system is now short on revenue because nobody's riding the metro to go to work because everybody's staying at home.
Mhm.
So you run into that issue. You run into, okay, so what are you going to do with all this excess office space? So let's say you're a business and you needed 3 floors of an office, but you've really decided, look, I only really need 1 floor of the office. The other 2 floors can work at home. Well, you're going to end up with this massive flood of empty office space. And I'm still seeing office buildings being built all over the area. So what's going to happen when you're building office space, but we all can foresee, like, and I agree with you, a lot of people can work at home. You see this and you go, so you're still building offices, but you're going to end up with all of this empty space.
Oh,
How?
that's all right. BlackRock and Vanguard will buy it up and then turn it into cheap housing, and you'll own nothing, and you'll be happy.
Yeah, well, that's not going to happen here. Not with me. And I think that's going to be part. I there's always a huge set of unintended consequences when the government does anything. I think people need to look at those things and analyze them and go, look, this is the actual economic impact if we start telling people to do this. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. You start, people aren't driving to work. Suddenly they're not paying gas taxes, so you have less money available for road repair, but you don't need as much for road repair because less people are on them. So how do you balance all this stuff out? I don't think anybody's looking at this stuff. And if they
Yeah.
are, I'm not hearing about it because they're not coming out and going, hey, this is what's going to happen. If all you people stay at home, here's the big benefit of it, or here's the downside to it, or both of those things.
I do hear a lot of the downsides from people like Dave Ramsey, who I'm not too familiar with him, but there's a YouTube channel that I follow that is very much about just pointing out like just a creepy level of what's the word? I guess just a creepy level of adherence and loyalty to the company that you work for, and believing that it's a family, and that and like legitimately not being like, oh yeah, as a culture we get along. Like, no, you think it's their family, and then you just get laid off with 1,000 other people on a Zoom call without anybody talking to you and no severance. And so people who own these or are renting these office spaces are definitely wanting to get people back in the offices because they have they have expenses that aren't going away whether the people are there or not. But again, it seems like a perfect opportunity to revamp the entire the entire way that we approach doing work and productivity. And especially with the gas crisis, it's just a matter of, yes, if things are to go back to the way they were, people do have to go back to the offices for the most part. But do things really actually have to go back to exactly the way they were? and
I
and, and
I agree, but what I'd like to see is the government propose some stuff. Maybe if they said,
Yeah.
"Look, we're going to give you for every employee that you don't have come into work, we're going to give you $1,000 tax break or whatever, $10,000 tax break at the end of the year." If you put a plan out there like that, a lot of companies go, okay, let's figure it out. Who needs to be here? Who doesn't? Because I have a financial incentive to not do it. That could
Mhm.
actually impact the price of gas and the supply and demand on
Right.
gas and could affect pricing. We're not seeing any plans. What we're hearing is, let me tell you who's to blame for this. It's Putin.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, I don't I I think Putin contributed to it, but things were out of hand before the war. Okay, so
Hmm.
don't you can't lay this all on Putin, and
Well, you
you
can,
have
but you'll be wrong.
well, yeah, it's not a valid talking point. So what I don't ever hear is what's the plan to get us out of this? Releasing oil and gas from the National Reserve, it has a negligible impact, if any. It's literally a speed bump.
Yeah, they're like
Uh,
30 barrels. Like,
yeah.
that's like 12 hours, if that,
You know,
in one
I
state.
I think you gotta do some things that kinda, incent and drive things in the industry, but you need to make sure you're looking at all of those, and I don't know if our government is set up to be actually responsive and nimble and able to analyze what these potential societal impacts would be to know, is this really going to have any sort of benefit? And so they don't do anything. The
Mhm.
solution is we're gonna fly planes to Europe, load them up with pallets of baby formula, and fly them back. And I'm like, okay, but you just said you're really big on the whole Green New Deal, and you flew all these jets over there to fill them up with pallets of formula. And now how are you going to distribute the formula? And yeah, nobody has any of these answers. And it just, and I heard today, one thing they mentioned at the local news that cracked me up. They said, "Oh yeah, by the way, there's a new wave of COVID tests available. You can get 3 of them for free." And I'm like, "Okay, we've already moved on. Where are you people? That issue's dead. I'm dealing with gas prices now." But, we're not the government is still responding to the last crisis.
Mhm.
They're not even and those testing kits don't solve anything. They don't fix the problem.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to watch. I gotta tell you, this election cycle is going to be hilariously fun.
I definitely agree, and I mean, listen, I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but just getting back to the book itself, I'm curious if there because not everybody on the left is this crazy Antifa rioting, whatever. Um, if there is just somebody who is maybe by default of not really paying too close attention and but you know hearing the propaganda that goes around, and so this person identifies as a Democrat or a liberal or whatever, but they're not super hardcore left wing fringe, all of that. Do you think that they would be able to gather a gather a perspective from this book that they wouldn't find elsewhere, or do you really are you just have you just decided to speak to your audience and say, hey, if you're if, this book is about you and it's not going to speak fondly of the people you associate with, and that's fine, it's just not for you.
I tend to fall in that latter camp, but I will say this: I think anybody time an author writes a book, a good goal of a book is for people to have dialogue about the book. And to be able to converse about the book and go, I totally thought this was stupid. This is dumb. I don't agree with this. But gee, this other part really connected with me, and I can see where somebody might form that opinion. I won't exclude anybody, mostly because I'm a mercenary and I like everybody's money, so that's fine. I encourage people on the left to buy the book. But I also want to be very clear. If you've drank the Kool Aid and you're in that camp, and you get your news from The View and you get your news from MSNBC. I got to be honest with you. You're going to consume this book, and it's going to just pump up your blood pressure because you're going to go, "Oh no, we're not like that. We don't do that." It doesn't matter what examples I have and what proof I can put forward to you. You're if you've drank the Kool-Aid, nothing's going I'm not trying to convert you over, and that's never the goal of this book. If you want to have a good discussion about it, you want to have some dialogue about it, and you want to go, how did you come to that conclusion, even if it's a joke, how did you come to that conclusion? Hey, I'll have that discussion. I think that's perfectly fine. But what I've seen is, well, wait, you got to do this fair. Can you do one for the Republicans now? And I'm like,
Yeah.
no,
No.
this concept of your concept of equity means nothing, and that's part of what we all struggle with.
Hmm.
It's okay for us to have a book for
Yeah.
a conservative audience. It's
Hmm.
okay if you guys write a book for a liberal audience. I would never tell you you can't read that book or it needs to be banned or whatever. You want to write a book that says Donald Trump's crazy? Go ahead, write that book. You want to write a book that says the Republicans are all batshit crazy? Go ahead, write that book. The free market will determine who's buying the book and who's reading it and what they feel about it. And that's how the whole system was designed to work. It's not designed to work with a bunch of social justice warriors and woke avengers saying this book has to be banned so that nobody can read it because I was offended by it. And we've been in that society for too long. It's the same
Oh yeah.
problem that Dave Chappelle's been facing is you can't joke about these things. Well, yeah, you can't joke about whatever you want. If you don't like Dave Chappelle's jokes, you just don't watch his shows. It's
It's that
really
simple.
simple.
Yeah. And so, with that being said, do you think that I mean, I definitely think that we, as a nation, have been bifurcated to a degree that there are two different realities, and there is such a bridge between those two schools of thought and perspectives that not it's not that nobody falls in the middle or there's no overlap, but the degree to which people are in one camp or the other is so prevalent. Are you more optimistic that that can change, or do you think that's going to continue and become more and more, far? That chasm is going to continue to grow.
I think, and your question's kind of valid, and I almost have to approach it in two stages. I think that chasm's going to grow. We have not had a tipping point yet. Okay, we haven't had an event that both sides can come together on that goes, okay, this was too far. This was this issue, this topic, this thing that happened is wrong by both perspectives. Um, we just haven't had that. It's not, a lot of people keep trying to paint January 6th into that, and it's not. It's we just haven't had that event yet, and because we haven't had that event, that chasm's going to continue to grow. I think there is going to be some sort of a tipping point that takes place. I don't know what that is. It could be China invading Taiwan. It could be something that Putin does. It could be something none of us know at all. It could be a volcano erupting out west or something. We just don't have. I can't. I'm not a seer that way where I can tell you here's what's going to happen. We just haven't had the event that will bring the American people back together. I think our best days are still ahead of us, and I've always believed that. And I believe that we are better than we were 10 years ago as a country. Even though we've got all these bumps and grinds and we're chafing against each other, I still think we're better than we were when I was a kid. And I believe our better days are still to come. And but to get there is going to be a bumpy road. And there's just no way around
Mm.
that. And to me, I think people need to start adopting kind of a positive view towards the future rather than the dystopian view
I
towards the
completely agree.
future. And which is odd because I do write a dystopian book series, but yeah, you have to have a view that things can be better. And if you don't believe that, then you're just part of the problem. You're just a whiny bitch.
Yeah,
And
well said.
that's the reality of it is you just gonna sit there and bitch about it, or are you gonna go do something about it? I choose to do something about it. I write books and I spark discussion and I have debate. A lot of people sit and just bitch. And I'm like, that's easy. Be part of the
Mhm.
solution. And I'm not saying I have a solution, but I'm gonna be a part of it.
And
Uh,
at least trying to find it, at least having the discussions, at least getting into it, at least reaching across and seeing, okay, what do you think about this? What do you think about what I think? I want to know what you think. All these kinds of things are because I'm very much aligned with you there. That I do think, like I mentioned before, I do think the pendulum swings, and we are at that moment where things just seem to be at a status quo. But that's only because we're waiting for the pendulum to swing back. And who knows? In 5 years, I might be railing against the Republicans and the conservatives again. But and which would be great because that would mean that all the things that I'm afraid of now didn't happen, and there's other things to worry about. There's
right.
always going to be things to worry about, but
Yeah.
the notion of a utopia and things being perfect is never realistic. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have an ideal that you should be working towards. And I much like you, I think too many people have lost the focus on that second point of what is the ideal, and what is the practical application of getting as close to that as we can, understanding that it is an ideal and we're not going to reach that perfection. It seems like the left is looking for perfection, which again you should have those ideals. Even if I don't agree with those ideals, you should have some type of ideals that you're working towards. But the fact that society isn't where it is today doesn't mean that everybody who is that doesn't agree with you is fill in the blank buzzword of the week. But I very much agree with you in the sense that I think things can be turned around, and I see more and more people on both sides of the aisle looking to try to make that happen.
I think there's some of that, and I think getting some fresh faces in Congress always helps. And I think we're going to have a batch, whichever side wins, comes out on top on this. You're gonna have a whole bunch of new faces. A
Mhm.
lot of incumbents have said, "Look, I'm not going to deal with this anymore," and they probably have a lot of reasons for that. You get fresh blood in there, you're going to get fresh perspectives, you're going to get new faces, you're going to get new voices, and I think that's all going to be positive in some respect. You will get some wackadoodle crazies. You always do. And they pretty much, stand out and people identify them and we move on. It's just, you're going to get that, but you're also going to get new ideas and new perspectives. And I think that's going to be helpful for the country. Like I said, I don't want to sound like I'm a half glass half full guy, but I am. I still think that the glass can be full. I think it can be full,
Absolutely.
but we have to get there together. It can't be one side dictating terms to
Yes.
the other side, and
It,
that goes for the Republicans or the Democrats. I just want to be clear with that. But
right.
right now, there seems to be a lot of you have to do what we want or else, and I got to be honest with you, it's not playing well with me, and it's not playing well with a lot of people in the country.
Yeah.
And
Well,
this woke movement, I think, has done so much damage to this country. Um, it's going to take a while for that to get weeded through, and there's going to be some more fits and problems that come out of that too. I fear that we're going to have more David Chappelle type incidents.
mhm,
Not just with comedians, but with anybody,
yeah.
where people are just going to go, fine, I'm just going to take a knife and go deal with this
For the
on my own.
cause.
Yeah, yeah.
And honestly, again, I see that on that can go talking there's extremists on both sides, and if this whole Roe v. Wade thing doesn't go the way that we are expecting, or even if it does, you can definitely see that if you genuinely believe that a state is allowing the murder of children, then it's only so ridiculous to think that going and using violence to stop that. It is ridiculous, but it's less ridiculous than just a Netflix special that you don't like. Like it's a very serious thing, and it scares me that the left doesn't really see how seriously the right takes this. But
Well, you look at what Disney did, and what you brought up Netflix, and that what triggered it as well. But we're dealing with companies that have kind of played footloose and fancy free and said, "Hey, we can do some social engineering in our programming. We can manipulate the audience. We can craft, what things are covered and what characters get positioned where and how, and we can play these games." And what's really happening is the marketplace is responding. And you look at what Netflix has been going through, they've kind of told their people, look, you're not going to like everything that we produce. And if you don't, go get a job somewhere else, because we have to make sure that we create content that is consumed by a broad audience, not just one perspective. Disney
Mhm.
still hasn't quite sobered up to it, but Disney, their stock's taken a massive hit. I mean,
Well, and
it
then
is
with the
at
daily, well,
a 7-year low for Disney
oh
stock.
wow, wow,
I gotta be honest with you. How does the chairman keep his job after all this? If you're going to a board
that's
meeting,
Hollywood.
well, yeah, but if you go to the board meeting, I gotta be honest with you, the shareholders are gonna start going, this guys, you got to get back to just delivering good content.
Right.
You don't have to pander to one side or the other. You can just deliver good content. And Disney wandered away from its own mission statement. They just went out and said, no, we have a gay agenda, we have an LGBT agenda, we're going to shove this down America's throats, we're going. And Disney now is associated with the word groomer, which came out of nowhere, but it was like, boom, there, you guys are grooming our children.
Yep.
That's something that's going to be hard for them to shake. Now, as
Yep.
pissed off as I was with all that, I still want to watch Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I didn't cancel my Disney Plus yet.
Yeah, I'm too into the Marvel stuff to cancel it.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I'm halfway through Moon Knight. Don't ruin it for
oh,
me.
good show. I won't say anything, but good
Okay,
show.
okay.
Well, I mean, that's a beautiful point. And again, I could go all day with you, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. I think we agree on a lot of things here. I'm sure there are things that we hold different opinions, but I think it's important for us to have these conversations. And there's not many people who hold your positions who are willing to speak freely and openly about them. I've been trust me, I've been trying to find more people, and it's just people are so scared and of being canceled, and it's like, well, if you don't speak out now, then you're gonna get canceled for something far less insidious later on. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm not saying the cancel crowd hasn't come for me and that there probably will be some repercussions down the road. Um, but you know, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop. Because I'm not going to cave in. I had to deal with bullies when I was a kid, and I'm talking real bullies, not cyber bullies. I dealt with bullies that used fists. Okay, guys that were on the football team, and I deserved it. In fairness, I had a wise ass mouth. I said things I probably shouldn't have, and I got reactions to it. I understood the implications then, and I understand them now. So we have to be able to have the discussions, and if you can't have the discussions, you're self-censoring, and that's what one side
hmm
really wants, is for
absolutely.
the other to just shut up and not make any noise and go away. And I'm not going to play that game.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Well, thank you again so much for coming onto the platform. It's always a pleasure to have you on. If you want to plug the book, social media, other books, please, the floor is yours.
Well, the book is out there. I always say just go to Amazon.com It's the Democratic Party Playbook, the 2022 election edition. Please check out my other conservative political thriller, Blue Dawn. Happy to pick you up. And the sequel for Blue Dawn's coming out in June. So, if you start Blue Dawn now, you can be ready when the sequel comes out.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
And you have a great day.
You too. Have a great summer.
All right, take care.
Bye.
So that was interesting. It's very clear that Blaine is not really interested in making friends with people who he feels are not his friends. There is, and I think that's very fair. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he said, but he made a lot of good points, and triggered me into talking about a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have otherwise talked about on this platform. But this is an opinion that is held by a large percentage of the population. So whether you think that we are, bouncing in an echo chamber, or that this really is whichever side of that you fall on, I'm here to tell you this is very much how a lot of people think about politics, the country, the Democratic Party, all of that stuff. I didn't hear anything that was that wild. The notion that things are going to hell is I think something that both parties think about each other, but it's very clear that Blaine is not somebody who is playing around. He definitely is well versed on these things, and whether you agree with his opinions or not, they are not unfounded. You may think that he has come to the wrong conclusion based on the information that he has, but the information that he has is good information. And it's we'll have to wait and see whether what he predicted is going to come to fruition. Not that he made these grandiose predictions, but based on just talking about what the Democratic Party will do, and seeing if this red tsunami is going to change things. I'm still, as much as I talked about how much I don't like what the Democratic Party is doing, it was only a few years ago that I was complaining about what the Republican Party was doing. And so for the Democratic Party to step up and take the lead in terms of who am I worried about, not only is that a big step, but it's not something that is set in stone. If the the religious right starts up in acting in ways that they were in the 90s, then I'll be right there, railing against them just like I was back then. But for right now, I don't have too much to say against what we talked about. I think that was a very good conversation. And if you think that it was a little bit out there, then maybe it's a little bit maybe it shows that you're maybe a little bit more in the echo chamber than you think you are. And I think that that's true of all of us. I think that we all have some notion that we've got things figured out, and that everybody's so stupid because they don't think this, and this happened, and when you look at this lined up after that, it's so obvious. But there's so many different, we don't have clear exact facts on a lot of these things, and it's very easy for the media to spin things, and it's hard to get good information. And so again, taking that information and drawing a direct line to whatever conclusion is not a sure thing. You might have seen all the same things that Blaine has seen over the years, and think completely differently about them. But I do think that his position is one, again, that is held by very many people and should be taken seriously. From in my opinion, it doesn't seem to be any ill will at all. I think he's poking holes in ideas that he doesn't agree with, maybe poking fun at people that he doesn't agree with. But all in all, he is trying to just put his own message out there, and those who are amenable to it, great, and those who disagree, he's made the decision that there's not much for for him to associate with those people, which is a sad thing. I do hope that whatever happens, that we get to a place where the chasm between the parties and between the realities that we're living in isn't so stark, isn't such a contrast, and then we can get back to being a united states. There's so much talk about political divorce and national divorce and all of that stuff. And if that is the best way for things to play out, then I'm all for whatever is best. But I would love if there was a way that we could prevent that from happening. Um, yeah. So I mean, we he and I went for a decent amount of time, and it's not the first time that I've talked to Blaine, so we kind of knew what we were getting when we went in. And I think we got a lot out of him. I don't think there's too much here for me. Again, the things that I agree or disagree about, I was pretty clear about the things that I do agree about. There's some things that I disagree about, but that's not really um relevant in terms of why we are doing this podcast. So that'll be there for another day. Blaine will be back. So make sure you follow him on Twitter, bpardo870. Go buy his book, The Democratic Party Playbook, the 2022 election edition. We also have the episode that he and I did months ago. Go check; it's still on the channel. Blue Dawn, another book of his that has to do with similar type of stuff. It's a fiction book, so if you like this episode, you will definitely like that episode. And you may very well like that book as well. But I want to thank Blaine again. I know that it can be very hard to express these types of opinions openly because of how much it's been demonized to think this way. But I thank him because I not only is it somewhat brave to come on and express these things, but it also shows other people who are thinking the same way that they're not alone, and that's important because we want to have the conversations that people of what people are really thinking. If you can only say certain things, then the conversations become irrelevant because we're not really talking about anything real. And so to keep the conversation on, hey, this specific thing, that specific thing, this is what's happening, all of that is helpful. And whether you agree or disagree, again, whether you agree or disagree, it's important stuff to have. And I thank Blaine for having the conversation with us. And I really enjoyed it. And I'd love to hear what you guys think. So please drop a comment and let me know what you think of Blaine. Let me know what you think of the book idea. Let me know what you think of my responses. All of that kind of stuff. I really would appreciate it. I would also love if you could check those support links in the description below. This is not free, although what is free is to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with all your friends. Even if you don't want to do that and you just want to sit at home and think about how awesome I am and how great this podcast is, that'd be okay too. But you should subscribe. But it'd be okay. But subscribe.